Happy Monday, everybody. Hope everyone had a good weekend. I can't believe I'm inside, but it's 65 degrees in New York City today, at least the high. But I suppose if I'm inside, I save myself the risk of picking up the coronavirus, which seems to be getting worse every day. Who knows, maybe next time I stream, I'll be streaming from deep inside a bunker somewhere. But I'll take the nice weather. Got the window open, so hopefully I don't get too much traffic noise in here, but we'll just have to see how that goes. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, basically stream a read-along of Basic Expert, which is probably my favorite or tied for my favorite of the versions of D&D that are out there in the world. I've played every one. I don't know that I could really rank them. I think they all have something to offer, even the much maligned 4th edition, I feel like has stuff to offer depending on the kind of game you like to play. But it always seems to come back for me to Basic Expert, and really by extension the white box rules, which this is very close to it. This is sort of the you could look at it as this was an attempt, along with the earlier Blue Box Holmes attempt, to kind of give folks a starter, a more readable, particularly if you came from a non-wargaming background, more readable version of the white box. It's very, very similar. This has a few things I think that people tend to not like these days, but it was a way of taking really what a lot of what the white box offered in terms of things like racist class. The white box didn't have racist class, but it had very strict I don't know what's guidelines or rules for what races could be what classes. So really racist class was just a simplification of that. The white box had an interesting, but I don't know if it was fully fleshed out or realized version of an elf that would switch between being a magic user and being a fighter. And I think you had to do that on an adventure by adventure basis, which I think in terms of what they mean is not necessarily a whole adventure, but I think that idea that, you go out on a given session and you play through whatever it is and you end up back at town at the end, you play through the content, come back, then I think in those sort of rest moments, you could swap. But I think they had to track XP separately, but I don't remember exactly. I want to do a read-through of that as well at some point, because I think it is really useful to look at, and I think it's fascinating. I think it's got a lot of everything I really like about it, about D&D is in there. I almost think that there should be sort of a comeback of the racist class. Maybe do it a little bit differently. You have things like in 5th edition, they have the, alternate human where you get kind of a perk. I think there are a lot of times now where you have to try to balance all the races to basically being zero level across the board balanced that way. And you run into issues, but if you could stretch those classes over levels, I think it would give you a lot more flexibility to do cool stuff and give you races or species or creatures as playable races that are impossible now or very difficult. And that was one of the things that the white box talked about very clearly was, hey, if a player wants to play a dragon, you figure out how to make it work. Or if a player wants to play a Balrog, and there were, I think in Gygax's home game, there was players who played Balrogs, and because you could spread their advancement over levels, you could start off with a very weak kind of baby Balrog, and then by, I don't know, whatever level, they would end up being a full-fledged Balrog, but at that point, or close to it, at that point, they'd be more or less balanced with the rest of the party, or close. And you could, because you had individual XP progressions for each class, you could really play with that advancement. So maybe a fully fledged Balrog is still super powerful, but then you look at the XP requirements to get there, and it's not the same as the thief, or maybe it's even more than a wizard. Whereas now, when they've taken the XP and made it universal, you can't have that anymore. You can't have these different growth patterns over the course of a campaign. If everyone's doing milestones or everyone's basically getting the same XP all the time, it forces you to at every level try to be the same. And the old game was just more flexible like that. And I've thought of something, when I look at things that I'm trying to create, is looking at, maybe I could have, culture as a class, right? So if you think of humanity in this world, maybe, and they kind of do this a little bit because, you have these weird creature monsters show up, a berserker is its own creature as opposed to just a soldier or a fighter. But you could have something like, hey, you want to have Vikings, and you want to have Mongols, and you want to have samurai, Japanese samurai, and yeah, you could have just those classes, but you could also say, okay, that we're going to have Vikings as a group, Scandinavians, whatever, and they have certain abilities. Maybe I don't know if I'm just going to be stereotypical, whatever. It could just be, okay, they're more used to the cold, and they whatever, and Japanese, maybe they have some kind of better discipline, things like that. But you could play a lot with that, and obviously these are the kind of stereotypical things they probably wouldn't want to do. But if you take it on to, just go into a fantasy basis, you could have things like what makes high elves different from other elves, and you can, instead of just having to say, okay, they all have to be bounced at level 0, you can say, no, we can have a more of a progression. So there's the things that I miss. But again, races class is one of those maligned things, and we'll get to that when we get to that section. But let's see. I've got a couple of hours before I got to bail, so let's see how far I can get through these basic rules before I have to retire and save the rest for another day. The rules aren't terribly long, and unlike in the more modern books, they basically all the information, players and DMs, in one book. And I think they kind of split it basically in half. The front half is what everybody needs to know, in particular players need to know, and the back half is what, as a game master, as a dungeon master, you need to know. There will probably be some things I will skim over. I'm probably not going to go through all of these are all the attributes, because I figure we all know what the attributes are. But if there's something interesting, I will try to call it out. I will spend more time on the things that I find interesting about the rules, or what I find appealing. Feel free, if you're in the chat or whatever, to let me know in comments if there's something that I should touch on or whatnot. But let's dive in. Okay, just the table of contents. Nice little art. I will skip over the forward and the acknowledgements. All right, so I don't think we need to get too much. I'm going to put on my old man glasses here so I can just see things just a smidge better. This is just giving us, how to use this book. Always nice. What the dungeons. I'll read what the D&D game is all about, because it's interesting to see when you look back at what these guys were saying. I think this is 1980 or maybe 80. I think it's 1980, but it could be plus or minus a year. Wait, let's see. What did it say on the forward? So, okay, so the forward was written in December 1980. So probably the book maybe published 81. I don't know. But let's see what they say. So here we could say we got basically 1980. What was their conception of what D&D is all about? Dungeons & Dragons fantasy adventure game, D&D game for short, is a role-playing adventure game for persons 10 years and older. In the D&D rules, individuals play the role of characters in a fantasy world where magic is real and heroes venture out on dangerous quests in search of fame and fortune. Characters gain experience by overcoming perils and recovering treasure. As characters gain experience, they grow in power and ability. Right, so that's pretty much not really any different from what you might say if you're playing 5th edition. It probably would stand to be the same thing. I think that if we, just looking at it in hindsight, the kind of things we might point out as being a little bit different, right? It's the fame and fortune being your main drivers, as opposed to a backstory or stories, where they don't mention stories at all. They don't mention having kind of character goals, in a sense. We're all adventurers are here to kind of make money and gain fame and power, right? And how do you do this? You do this by overcoming perils and getting treasure. I think it's nice they say perils. They don't specifically mention killing monsters, and we'll get in that, but when we get there. But killing monsters is a very poor source of experience and treasure, which is the main thing. So, recovering treasure is important. Let's see. At least 2 persons are needed to play this game, though the game is most enjoyable when played by a group of 4 to 8, right? So, now we look at people playing with 8 saying, oh my gosh, that's too many. But the fact that these rules are simpler, the game moves a little bit faster, it can support more people. More people well. And not that, and look, people will play with a bunch of people with 5th edition to make it work, but, in general, this game is just a little bit easier in that regard. This game, unlike others, does not use a playing board or actual playing pieces. All that is needed to play are these rules, the dice included in the set, pencil and paper, graph paper, and imagination. The game may be more exciting if miniature-led figures of the characters and monsters are used, but the game can be played without such aids. Okay, right. So you need at least 2 people, one person to be the GM, one to be a player. Though it's more fun if you got more people. You can play with minis, but Theater of the Mind is absolutely fine. All standard stuff. Now, I have the box set. I actually should have probably brought out so I could at least show it, but I didn't. But I have it. This is the digital edition that is up on drive-thru. There's a link in the show notes. And it's one of these rule books that I encourage people to buy. I covered the... I forget the Retro Clone's name now that's very popular. It used to be BX Essentials, but now it is Old School Essentials. And it's fine, and I think a lot of people prefer the way they've laid out that book to this book. But, look, if you're a fan of D&D, if you're interested at all in these things, throw a couple of bucks down and pick up the digital version of this. And, just it's good to read. Or you can just keep watching this, and I will keep plugging through. All right, so I'm going to skip the definitions. I think we all are pretty aware of those. We have an intro. I'll read a little bit of the intro. At the start of the game, the players enter the dungeon, and the DM describes what the players can see. One player should draw a map from the DM's descriptions. That player is called the mapper. I miss mappers. People seems to be a lot more now where in games in which the GM is kind of expected, or even the GM feels responsible for maintaining a map for the players. But certainly growing up and in a lot of the games I played, this was not the GM's responsibility. This was somebody, and it was fun too. Someone would get out their graph paper or plain paper or someone they would do, and they would sit down and they would draw out the map. And it was kind of a game within the game, because what you could do is you're going through the dungeon, there are probably secret areas, things like that. And so you're trying to put together the map. Obviously, you want to be able to find your way in and out, but you're also trying to locate where areas might be. You're looking at where there might be gaps, where maybe there shouldn't be gaps, trying to figure things out. It was a fun little extra game that's kind of fallen by the wayside. And I know things like Roll20 make it more difficult because there's not really a way, I don't think, to have a player-drawn map in Roll20. And then when you're using that, you're just kind of using Fog of War to kind of reveal the map. It's just a different feel. But I kind of miss the mapper as sort of a mainstay, or just player mapping. But, so if you're playing in person, I recommend trying it at one point. Obviously, just don't spring it on people, but could be an interesting, and I think it adds that immersion factor, because the players feel like they're really in command of exploring a place. As the player characters move further into the dungeon, more and more of the dungeon is mapped. Eventually, the DM's map and the player's map will look more or less alike. Yep. And this is where it's, obviously, as you're playing Theater of the Mind, you have to be, pretty clear with your descriptions so that people can get it right. It's sometimes players will goof up and do the wrong map. You want to make sure it's their goof up and not because you said the wrong thing and suddenly their map is wrong and it's your fault. To avoid confusion, the player should select one player to speak for the entire group or party. That player is named the caller. This is another one of those things that's kind of fallen by the wayside. I never played with a caller. I don't think I've played with anybody who has played with a caller. It seems like an interesting thing to do, an intriguing wrinkle. I think in one of some other videos I called out that maybe it could be something to do or maybe it was on a RPG breakfast chat. I thought about, the caller might be an interesting thing if you had players who were shy or didn't feel like talking. You had someone, you could you could rotate callers and let somebody be in charge. Essentially, the idea is that the players would all huddle together, come up with what they want to do, but then one player, that caller, transmits those commands to the DM. And it could be an interesting, like I said, it's an interesting thing to do it. I think everyone's just more or less comfortable speaking their own character actions to the GM. I don't know how much faster it would make the game if you used the caller, but I did think if you had players who either wanted to integrate and kind of push them to talk more, you could rotate the caller. That way they would have a chance to sort of have that command in a way, or at least that attention. Or if you had players who were shy and didn't want to talk, having a caller might alleviate some of that shyness. But it's one of those just methods of play that's kind of just disappeared in the annals of history. As details of the dungeon are revealed, the player characters will meet monsters, quote-unquote monsters, which they will have to avoid, talk to, or fight. Notice fight is the last thing on that list. It's not the first thing, right? If you're looking at it in terms of how you should be approaching it, it's avoid, talk, or fight. I think that's kind of key, and I'll come back to this later, but it's one of those things that's easy to miss and when you read through these things, but it's clear that they're not putting fighting as your first option. Right? I don't think that is just arbitrary that they did that. A monster is any animal, person, or supernatural creature that is not a player character. A monster may be a ferocious dragon or a humble merchant. For game purposes, any creature not a player character is a monster. Human monsters are often called non-player characters or NPCs to separate them from other monsters. Again, it's sort of a key little distinction because you're going to use the term monster a lot, but they just mean anything that is not a player character is a monster. And NPCs being a particular type of monster, basically the humanoid types. I think the idea here is they want to make sure they impress upon you that just because they're using the term monster doesn't mean that they are just treated as vermin. But they needed a term to cover anything that's not players, and so they just used monster. They could have used something else, but I think any word's probably problematic in some ways. If you call them creatures, well, everything's a creature. What would you call them? You want to call them adversaries? Well, that kind of gives you the same thing as monsters. So they call them monsters, but it's not personal. Not personal NPCs. Just calling you monsters, sort of a shorthand. A meeting between player characters and monsters is called an encounter. During an adventure, the player characters will also discover treasure and try to avoid dangerous traps as well as encounter monsters. Sometimes, of course, the player characters will have to fight monsters. Such a fight is referred to as a melee. So I think it's interesting that important that the fighting monsters comes at the end of things, right? You can avoid, you can talk to, you can try all these things, and if all that fails, fight. And I think, again, this gets lost, I think, a lot of times when people just read these rules because they don't pick up on that context. And I know I've gotten into discussions with people where they just feel like, all you do is you go in and fight monsters. And it's clear then that they've never played, because if you ever played these games and you just went in and tried to fight every monster, the only thing that would happen usually is you would die. Maybe you get lucky, but you'd end up burning through all your health before you could really explore, and you're probably going to miss a lot of the treasure. The pittance of treasure you get from monsters is not going to do it for you as far as leveling up. And chances are you only got a handful of hit points. So you're going to have a very short, unhappy lifespan if you do that. But if you've never played it and you just read it, you might come under the impression that, this is just going and fight stuff. But, again, looking at the context, you can see here that they are not putting fighting up front as your first line of action. It's been put strategically as the last line. Like, hey, if all else fails, fight. In D&D rules, player characters try to gain experience, which is earned as experience points or XP. Experience points are given out by the DM at the end of each adventure. This is one of those times where they use adventure. I think they really mean a session, because a lot of times you see this in some of the in a lot of the old modules as well, that they're sort of patterned that you'll get kind of one session. Each level of a dungeon or each area will be about one session's worth, and then you retire back to civilization for the most part at the end of your sessions. Not kind of the West Marches. It wasn't called West Marches obviously back then, but what would then be sort of patterned into West Marches was this idea of you go out, do a foray into whatever, and then you come back and you hit back to town. So it's kind of, you get back to town at the end of your session, you tally up your experience. Not so much you're going to go through a whole adventure like Keep on the Borderlands and only get experience once. Let's see. Although the rule book only explains the abilities of characters up to 3rd level experience, further supplements will explain character levels up to 36, right? So after this is the basic book only goes up 3rd level. After that, you got to go to the expert rules as a fire engine roars off nearby. Hopefully it's not the emergency that it sounds like. Okay, use of the word level. Okay, I'm going to go. Okay, I won't get into that. I'll just read the bold. All players begin the game at the 1st level experience. Yep. Okay, we're talking about monsters. We got spells. We got dungeons. Dungeon level is used to refer to the depth of one floor of a dungeon and gives an idea of how difficult the dungeon area is. This is an important thing, and these things that sometimes you just kind of read through these things, but when I do these read-alongs, I do notice things because I guess I'm just more focused. I'm paying more attention to this stuff, but it's right up front for you as players to be aware of that. The deeper you go into the dungeon, the harder it is, and it kind of corresponds to the level of your party to the dungeon level. So 1st level is for 1st level, 2nd level for 2nd level, kind of that thing. But it's right there. It's right in the intro. It's right up front to give you real awareness when you're exploring into things. And if you remember, the kind of games that were played a lot were these kind of mega dungeons in these areas that had many, many levels. And it was really important as a party to be aware of what level you're on. And in fact, there were specialized traps that were just made there to kind of try to trick you. So you thought you're on one level, but you actually went to a different one. Because as players, you want to remember, you want to know what level you're on, because that will tell you about more or less how hard the dungeon is. Let's see. Okay, how to use the dice. I'm going to skip. Okay, we'll go to how to win, because it's one of those interesting things to see what they thought about that. Discussions and arguments that continue to this day. I think over the weekend on Facebook, I saw several posts about people talking about DMs who are fixated on winning, or players who are fixated on winning. So here we go. How to quote-unquote win. Quote, winning, unquote, and losing, quote-unquote, things important to most games do not apply to D&D games. The DM and the players do not play against each other, even though the DM often plays the role of various monsters which threaten the player characters. The DM must not take sides. He or she is a guide and a referee, the person who keeps the action flowing and creates an exciting adventure. Player characters have fun by overcoming fantastic obstacles and winning treasure, but this does not end the game. Nor is the game quote-unquote lost when an unlucky player's character dies, since the player may simply roll up a new character and continue playing. A good D&D campaign is similar to the creation of a fantasy novel written by the DM and the players. And that's kind of the first element of story, right? Because you're building a fantasy novel, you're kind of telling a story. But it's a story of, it could be of multiple generations of player characters, because player characters might get unlucky, they might die. It is not the end. You just get a new hero and you keep going, but it's clear, right? The DM is not your adversary, even though they have to take the role of the adversaries. They should be, the term I always like to use a lot, the referee. Impartial, just trying to kind of play it as it comes. Play it as it comes, keep the game moving, keep the action flowing. Okay, should I go through how to player character information? I guess I'll do this. I've actually had people ask me questions about creating characters for old school games or BX. Oops, hold on. Just go. Not gonna just type something in the chat there real quick. Sorry about that. So we've got here on a blank sheet of paper, write down the names of the 6 player character abilities: strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma, in that order. If you got a character sheet, use it. So here's the big thing that throws people up. A lot of times in your modern game, you're thinking of what your character is going to be, and then you're either going to use, maybe you're going to roll for stats. Rolling for stats is still a very popular method of character creation, or it could often be point buy or arrays, and then you're going to roll them up, and then you're going to move everything where you want it to just figure out what works best for the character you want to make. So I come in and say, I want to be a half-elf ranger. I roll my dice. I'm going to look around, and it's 46 drop 1, which gives you, I think, an average of 12. So you're more than likely to get at least a couple of stats that are at or above average, right? If 3d6, I think the average is 10. So you're at least going to get 12, which is, I think, plus 1, right? At least, and I think in 5th edition, it's still plus 1. Anyway, so you can at least get it. It stands to reason, unless you're unlucky, you're going to get some above average dice. Then you maneuver them around and say, okay, I want to play a ranger, and I think I want dex. I want con is always nice, and I guess wisdom. And again, apologize if I'm wrong. It's been a while since I've looked at the 5e ranger, but say dex, wiz, con, something in that order, and then maybe strength, and then charisma. And so I will place those, putting the best scores where I want them to be in the most obvious attributes, and I go from there. Doesn't work that way in Basic Expert and in the old school games. One, you're going to roll 3d6, no drop anything. So you're going to get 10 as the average, and you're most likely probably going to get at least one that's probably below 10. And you're going to go down the line in order. So you're going to start with strength. You're going to roll your strength. And notice that they've changed the order of these, right? Because now it goes strength, intelligence, wisdom, dex, con, charisma. So you're going to roll them. You're just going to go bang, bang, bang down the line. And you're going to, at the end of it, you're going to get this array of values in your attribute scores. And the way to kind of think of it is, this is like your DNA. This is this raw material that you have. Now you're going to take that and you're going to say, okay, what can I play? What do these stats allow me to play? And maybe maximize what I did well. So if I rolled a 12 and if it's in strength, and maybe that's my highest roll, I'm going to look at it and say, well, maybe I want to be a fighter. Maybe I look and say I could be a dwarf. I could be those things. If I have a really high Wisdom, and the other thing too, and we'll get into that, is the attribute scores don't have nearly the amount of impact, with maybe a couple of exceptions, that they do in the modern game. Because if you look at it, wizard spells aren't tied to your intelligence. Intelligence gets you languages. I don't think clerics' wisdom impacts them. We'll get into it, and I can see if I've just misremembered. I believe that wisdom doesn't really impact a lot. Obviously, constitution's hit points, so that's always kind of important. Dexterity does give you a bonus to, some bonuses that are important. Charisma is nice when you get to followers and hirelings and those things. So none of you're not stuck in which you have to have a certain score to play. Yes, it's better to have a high strength fighter than a low strength fighter, but you can get by with a low strength fighter. But that's how you're going to do it. You're going to roll your stats, and you're going to see how they work. And one of the old tricks was that the non-human racist classes were best used if you had bad stats, because they were generally limited. So what will happen, and I'll get into, when we get into the racist classes, is that the demi-humans, dwarf, elf, and halfling, gave you a bunch of bonuses up front, but then their advancement would peter out much faster. So you're essentially getting more up front for less down the line. So if you're a human thief, you can go all the way up to the end, level 9, level 10. I think we'll see what a halfling can get up to. But if you have good stats, you want to try to get that longer advancement, so you'd want to pick a human. If you had weak stats, the idea is, why not get your bonuses all up front? Because this guy may not make it to level 10, maybe not make it to level 2. So go ahead and get some of the perks up front. So that was kind of a neat trick. But you're going to roll down the line, and you're going to look at that, and that will determine what you're going to play. So you can come into the game with a predisposed notion of what your character is, but unless you're playing with house rules that let you maneuver stuff, if you're playing by the book, you're going to end up having to take what you have and try to make it work. And I'll go down the rest of this, because you do have some options for moving things around to kind of tweak stuff, so to speak. So we'll see that. So you're going to roll down the line, 3d6. So it says, read the section on character abilities. I'm not going to jump back and forth, but we'll get in there. You write down any special abilities, and you can go through and do your adjustments, do your bonuses and penalties. You put a section aside for XP. You determine your hit points. Check out your alignment. Get yourself some gold. Buy some equipment. Figure out your armor class. Find your attack bonuses, and then you're done. So they give you a summary. And so then you can see here they have this bottom left, they've got just written on lined paper, which I think, if at least back in the day playing in like grade school, I had a lot of characters written on just whatever notebook paper I had laying around. Ooh, Borg's got a 17 for strength. That's pretty good. So, Borg here, if we look at his stats, he's got a 17 strength, 8 intelligence, 10 wisdom, 7 dexterity, 15 con, and 6 charisma. You look at that 15 con, 17 strength, it's either he's going to play a fighter or a dwarf. And 17 strength and 15 con is good. So just be human, take the fighter class, go from there. Character abilities. I don't know if it's worth really. I'll just skip over there. I don't think there's anything. Yeah. So intelligence is muscle power, ability to use it. I even give you a look. I like this little hint. If you have a strength of 13 or above, you should probably consider being a fighter, a dwarf, one of those. Right. Good. Intelligence, learn and remember knowledge. If you have an intelligence of 13 or above, you should play a magic user. Right. Intelligence is the prime requisite for magic users. And one of them for elves. Wisdom is so prime requisites are these things that you need, right? So the attribute numbers themselves aren't terribly important once you get into calculating stuff, but certain classes do require certain scores. So that's kind of where they come in, but they're not terribly important over time after that. I mean, you get a little bump, but it's not terrible. But this is also why in first edition you could have classes like the Paladin have a lot of powers, but they have such high prerequisites that you could play for years and years and never roll good enough stats to qualify to be a Paladin. Now you can adjust your ability scores, but you have to kind of know which class you are, because you can do your prime requisites. So these requisite scores that each class has, you can kind of mess around with them, lowering some scores to bump up other scores. But you can't do that to your, let's see, your constitution, I think, in your charisma. Yeah, you can't raise your constitution or charisma. Dexterity, you cannot lower it, but you can raise it. Wisdom can be lowered by some classes, the ones who don't have it as a prime requisite. Intelligence by others. Strength by others. So strength, intelligence, and wisdom can be lowered for some of them. Dex can never be lowered, but you can raise it up if it's a prime requisite. And constitution, charisma can't be touched. So you have a limited ability after you've done everything. You've picked your... Remember, this is but remember, you're doing these adjustments after you've picked their class. So you can't do adjustments to qualify for a class. You have to you rolled your stats, you pick your class, and now you look at that class as prime requisites, and then you can mess around with some of the scores to a limited degree to kind of push up your prime requisite score. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility, but not a lot, and it's kind of at the end of the process, not before picking a class. Then you're going to roll for your hit dice, you roll for your hit points. So I won't cover that too much. Here we see the bonuses. So here we go. So prime requisites are important from the fact that it will impact your experience. So if your prime requisite's really bad, you're going to get negative. You're going to lose experience points. It's going to be harder for you to level up, and if it's good, you will get some benefits. But notice the penalties are harsher than the bonuses are good. So just being above 9 or being at 9 or above is fine for the prime one. No big deal, right? 9 to 12 is normal, and then you really, 13, you really have to have rolled above average to get anything, and at most it's 10%. Strength is going to help you with damage and opening doors. Opening doors, that's a thing. Basically all the doors in dungeons, I kind of default to being, I think, either locked or stuck. So you can have to hammer them. You have to try to just force them open, and they will close and get stuck or locked behind you. But monsters, remember, monsters, anything that's not you, they get to open them for free. Let's see, we got intelligence. Gives you languages. And languages, this is one of those things, again, looking at it, maybe the way that the game is now, you look at it and you say, oh, well, what's the big deal with languages? Languages kind of stinks. That's like the water breathing of attribute powers. But it is not a bad thing, because the more languages you have, the more creatures you can talk to. And the more creatures you can talk to, the more creatures you could potentially not fight, because you can barter with them, bargain with them, plead your case, whatever. You can, parlay with. So you want to have guys that can speak multiple languages and kind of spread those languages out, so that when you run into goblins or kobolds or orcs or whatever, lizard men or whatever, you have a chance of knowing how to talk their language. It actually can be pretty game-changing when you can speak some of the monstrous languages. So it is not a throwaway kind of feature. Wisdom gives you bonus on magical saving throws. But remember, it's fixed, right? You're not. It's not going to be exponential over the course of the game. It's fixed. All these things are fixed. So yes, having the better scores is going to give you this bump, and no one can take that away from you. But it's not going to exponentially increase over the course of the game. You're getting this initial kind of bonus for having just great DNA, having great breeding, and then that's it. Everything else is going to be dependent on your class advancement, which I like. Dex, right? So you're going to get a bonus on hit rolls for missile fire. You get a bonus to armor class. And then you get a bonus to initiative. So, Dex is still important. Though heavy armor will impact that. Constitution, hit points. Always good to have hit points. And charisma, again, kind of there with intelligence, it's more important than you might think, particularly if you're just reading the rules. Being able to get better reactions, being able to have more retainers, being able to increase the morale of those retainers is super useful. If you can get a +2 to all your reactions, if we're using reactions, which we'll get to, hopefully if I get to the DM facing stuff, reactions will determine a lot of encounters, how negative, if they're negative, if they're neutral, or if they're positive. And if you can bump that in the positive range better, or at least skew the odds in your favor, then that's a lot of more encounters that are going to go your way without having to fight them. And the less things you have to fight, the better off you will be. Don't sleep on it. So we have some class tables. So we got clerics. I miss the titles for levels. You start off as an acolyte, then you become an adept, then you become a priest. Shows your hit dice. Notice clerics, no spells. No spells at first level. No healing. First level cleric has 0 healing. So you know it's talk about being deadly. You don't even get a single cure light. You get zip, but you can turn. You do get turning it right away. Dwarves don't get any spells. Have a D8 hit die. Elves D6, but they get some spells and some other stuff. Fighters also D8 hit die. And again, see how these experience points, this allows them to really tailor the curve here. So if you're playing an elf, yeah, you're super powerful, but what it takes you to get to second level is the same thing it takes a fighter to get to third level. And to get to third level, I don't even know. We don't even know, fighters will be 4th, 5th, 6th level. So yeah, you're going to get a bunch of perks up front, but you're going to level up really slowly. And then dwarves are not quite, dwarves don't get quite as much perks as the elves, but but still they are going to go up more slowly. Halflings are about the same as fighters, but they kind of are doing thiefly things. If you look at the thief over here, it only takes you 2,400 to get to third level as a human thief, whereas that halfling, and the halfling does have a couple perks, but it's going to take you, almost double as much. So it's a lot. And then you get thief abilities. This is one of those things that in a modern game, they would not do this because nothing else in the game by default uses percentages. But they chose this way to do thieves' abilities. You could probably convert them to other, using D20 or D6 or something else, but that's what they have it. So, and the other thing that this brings up is one of those things that it's, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a little bit controversial in a sense because you start off being so poor at these things. It's like, why would I try to open locks? I'm at first level. And I think I think a lot of people read this, and I tend to read it as these are for extraordinary things, not the run-in-the-mill things. So the example that most people bring up, including myself, is that they call this climb shear services, not just climb. Or, move silently as opposed to quietly. Like, no, you're silent. You're making 0 noise. Not you're just being kind of sneaky. Like, you are dead quiet, right? Hide in shadows. Anybody can hide in the dark, but only a thief can find just a little shadow and dip in there and vanish, so to speak. So keep those in mind if you're playing a thief. I think to be a little bit, more expansive with what you give them because these percentages are really low. And if you just look at it like anything takes that, there's only a 10% chance, it's kind of like, well, they're sort of useless. But I don't think that was the intent. I think the intent is that's for stuff that's, if it's something that, hey, a normal person has a chance to find, then the thief kind of finds it. If it's something extraordinary, then do that. But, play it as you will. But it's tough by default, right? It's tough. Open locks, maybe only tried once per lock, right? So no just sitting there and just hammering that skill over and over. There it is. You can do it once. The thief may not try again on a difficult lock until they've gained another level. So, right? So that's an interesting thing, too. Is that there could be something on a dungeon you can't get in. You will get a level, come back, maybe you can get in there now. Find or remove traps. Chance of finding a trap. And then they can try to remove it. And you can only try once. Pickpockets. Move silently. And pickpockets is kind of special because nobody else really gets a chance to do that. So it doesn't seem like much, but it's one of those things that you have to have a thief. No one else can really can do that. There's kind of niche protection for these things. Move silently will always seem successful, but the DM will know. So it's kind of a little hint there to maybe roll on the side so that the thief thinks the thief doesn't have meta knowledge that they can. Climb Steve services, hide in shadows, and then hear noise. Then we get into I don't think I need to get into this nitty gritty. Let's see. So we have clerics. They can turn undead. They're going to get spells at some point. I'll do the meta. I'll do the non-humans because that is the more interesting thing. So dwarves. They can only be 12th level, right? So they talked about earlier that potentially up to 36th level, but dwarves only get to 12. They do have a couple special abilities. They have better saving throws. They have infravision, 60 feet. They can find slanting passages, traps, shifting walls, and new construction 1/3 of a time. So you roll 1 or 2 on a d6 if they're looking for them. And all dwarves can speak common, dwarvish, and an alignment tongue, plus the language of gnomes, kobolds, and goblins. So this is kind of a sneaky key, right? So maybe you pick somebody and they have high, somewhat good strength, but they have really crappy intelligence. And you think, well, I'm only going to get to speak one language, if that. But if you pick dwarf, you suddenly get 5 languages. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. Common, dwarvish, gnomish, koboldish, goblinish. Elves, they get a d6. They basically are fighter magic users. They're basically a fighter magic user multi-class. Let's see. Elves have infravision, also to 60 feet. When looking for secret or hidden doors, they're able to find them, again, on a roll of 1 or 2 on a d6. They cannot be paralyzed by ghouls. They speak common, elvish, and an alignment language. And also orcs, hobgoblins, and gnolls. So you get a nice selection of languages again for them. Fighters are fighters. Let's see. Halflings. Halflings use a d6 also. They can advance to maximum of 8th level. Oh, did I miss? How far can elves? Oh, they actually don't say, do they? Oh, 10th level. Elves can get to 10th level. Halflings can get to, what did they say? 9th level. No. 8th level. Any type of weapon and armor. Let's see. They cannot use two-handed swords or longbows, but they can use, other short bows, short swords. You need to have both a 9 in dex and con. They get better saving throws. Let's see. They get a +1 with missile weapons. They have a -2 on their armor class, and the armor class is descending in this case, so -2 is good if they're being attacked by creatures larger than man-sized. Let's see. They add 1 to their initiative. And they get a 10% chance. Oh, they only have a 10% chance of being being detected in sort of wilderness cover situations, and a 1/3 of a chance the halfling won't be seen in normal light. So they're sneaky. They're sneaky. They got the guile. It's pretty much what you would expect from a Tolkien-esque hobbit, essentially. You got magic users, they get spells. They only get a whopping 1 spell at first level, so you hope you get a good one. And a lot of old school games, I've run these too. You roll randomly for your spells, so you're not guaranteed to get sleep or magic missile. You might end up with something exceedingly not useful for most circumstances. And even something like detect magic, which is super useful in some circumstances, it can seem tough because it's, in the times where it's most useful, when you think your whole party's going to die, it doesn't do anything for you. But it can be very useful when you're trying to look at loot and maybe see if it's like magical, or if you need to magical traps or whatever else, right? But it can be tough. 1 spell per day. Then we get thieves. We already went through their thief abilities. Here we get to the essentially 3-axis, or really it's 2-axis, right? 2-axis alignment, which is basically law on one side, or maybe it's just 1 axis, just kind of a line. Line on one side, chaos on the other side, neutral in the middle. And here they're just as sort of a historical reference. In the beginning, in the white box, alignments were basically teams that you were on. I don't think they even mentioned any kind of more moral parts of what they meant. It was just law on the one hand, chaos on the other, or unaligned in the middle. Here they're starting to shift because they are giving you some moral ideas of what they are. So here it says law. is the belief that everything should follow an order and that obeying rules is the natural way of life. Lawful creatures will try to tell the truth, obey laws, and care about all living things. Lawful creatures always try to keep their promises. They will try to obey laws as long as such laws are fair and just. And that's an important part, right? As long as such laws are fair and just. Sometimes you get this twisted idea of something will say lawful good. Obviously, there's no such thing as lawful good here, but in lawful good that, the paladin must follow all laws no matter how ridiculous the laws are. And it's like, no, the laws are supposed to be fair and just. If they're not fair and just, they no longer qualify to be obeyed by lawful creatures. Chaos is the opposite of law. It is the belief that life is random and that chance and luck rule the world. Everything happens by accident and nothing can be predicted. Laws are made to be broken as long as a person can get away with it. It is not important to keep promises, and lying and telling the truth are both useful. And then in between them is neutrality, is the belief that the world is a balance between law and chaos. It is important that neither side get too much power and upset the balance. The individual is important, but so is the group. The two sides must work together. Right? This is not quite the neutral that people put in later games, which is just do as I want. That is the whole of the law kind of thing. It's basically right there. The individual is important, but so is the group. You have to balance it. So your true neutral people are not just out there just doing nonsense. They are supposed to balance their desires with the truth. A neutral character is most interested in personal survival. Such characters believe in their own wits and abilities rather than luck. They tend to return the treatment they receive from others. Neutral characters will join a party if they think it is in their own best interest, but will not be overly helpful unless there is some sort of profit in it. Neutral behavior may be considered, quote, good or, quote, evil, or neither, depending on the situation. Right? So you're in it for your own profiting, but you're not just some kind of, wild card. Ooh. Example of alignment behavior. The situation. A group of player characters is attacked by a large number of monsters. Escape is not possible unless the monsters are slowed down. A lawful character will fight to protect the group, whatever the danger. The character will not run away unless the whole group does. A neutral character will fight to protect the group as long as it is reasonably safe to do so. If the danger gets too great, the character will try to save himself or herself, even at the expense of the party. A chaotic character may fight the monsters or might run away. The character will not care what happens to the rest of the party. That's a really good way to put it. The lawful character's in it for the group. The neutral character's in it for the group to a degree, but the more important thing is themselves. And then the chaotic character is going to do what's just best themselves and doesn't care at all about the party, one way or another. Alignment languages. I like alignment languages. They have another one of those things that's kind of disappeared from the modern game, but it was useful. Each alignment has a secret language of passwords, hand signals, and other body motions. Player characters and intelligent monsters will always know their alignment languages. They will also recognize when another alignment language is being spoken, but will not understand it. Alignment languages are not written down, nor may they be learned unless a character changes alignment. When that happens, the character forgets the old alignment language and starts using the new one immediately. Note that playing in alignment does not mean a character must do stupid things. This is a good point. A character should always act as intelligently as the intelligence or score shows, unless there's a reason to act otherwise, such as a magical curse, right? So don't have to be dumb. It's because your alignment's telling you something. You don't have to act stupid. But back to alignment languages. The white box was more explicit. If you talked an alignment language that wasn't the one... so if you're in, say, a tavern and you decide to talk the language of law to someone and some creatures of chaos hear you, they would basically attack you right away. So it was cool because you had this thing, if all else fails, you could take this gamble and throw out the alignment language. If it works, then you still have a chance to parlay. But if you pick the wrong language, then it's initiative time. So it was an interesting thing. I like it. It is kind of weird and quirky, but nothing wrong with having some weird and quirky in your game. I'm not going to go through equipment. And then we get languages. There's a bunch that you could institute some kind of inheritance if you want. Talk about having hopeless characters if your stats are just really poor. And then they give an example of creating a player character, which I will skip. There's a character sheet. I don't think I need to go through the spells. Unless there's something interesting ones. Some spells can be reversed. So you have the kind of cure light wounds, cause light wounds, remove fear, cause fear. Charm person. I'm just going to read this one out because if you've just played, modern games, you might be shocked to learn exactly how powerful Charm Person, which is a first level spell, can be. This spell can be used on any human or human-like creatures such as bugbears, gnolls, gnomes, goblins, hobgoblins, kobolds, lizardmen, ogres, pixies, or sprites. It will not affect undead. Nor creatures larger than an ogre. If the victim fails to make a saving throw versus spells, the victim will believe that the spellcaster is its best friend and will try to defend the caster against any threat, real or imagined. If the caster speaks a language that the charmed creature understands, commands may be given to that victim. Any commands given will usually be obeyed, except that orders against its nature, alignment, and habits may be resisted, and an order to kill itself will be refused. Creatures with above average intelligence, a score of 13 to 18, may make a new saving throw each day. Okay, so if you're smart, 13 to 18, above average intelligence, you get a saving throw every day. Creatures with average intelligence, 9 to 12, which includes the monsters listed above, may save again once per week. So if you're below 13, you fail your save, you're in service, you're indentured for a week. And here's the kicker. Let's see. Creatures with below average intelligence may save once a month. You get lucky. I don't know what the intelligence of an ogre is. I'm pretty sure it's below average. You get lucky and that bad boy fails its save. You've got a month worth of ogre butler at your service. First level spell. Okay, first level spell. Now, it's kind of fun, and I've definitely seen games that play well with this because I've played in games where in which the magic user doesn't know exactly how long it's going to last. Just that the save's coming up, so that it kind of behooves them to either figure out what to do. You're like, okay, I've got this thing for a month, but I'm on week 3 and I don't know exactly when it's going to expire, so I got to figure out how to cut him loose before he just turns on me and decides to destroy me. So that's a great boon. If you're at first level, you run across an ogre, they cast that spell, fail that save, suddenly you've got this big bodyguard. Can be really powerful, but as I mentioned before, oftentimes you have to roll for your spells, so you might not get Charm Person. Detect Magic, Floating Disc obviously is always a good one. I've had players try to make Floating Disc like the spell of all spells, but it does make you appreciate why sometimes spells are written out the way they are now when you see someone try to take every edge case to try to make, like Floating Disc the equivalent of like a 9th level spell. Magic Missile, the classic. I don't think there's much else I want to read through here. Sleep is another classic one. Puts all kinds of things to sleep, and that's basically an encounter killer. If you rock off sleep and you roll well, that can basically take an encounter out of action. But that's fine, because the first level, you only get one of them. There's really no point, and really at no point you will ever be able to spam it too much. And then it only affects low-level enemies. So at a certain point, it's kind of a minion slash, vermin killer. But it's not going to turn the tide on things that are stronger. So at a certain point, sleep becomes less and less useful, except when you get lots of minion-type enemies running around, in which case it can still help out. Let's see, web, blah, 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 and they just give you some. There's the classic fireball. I think that's about it. Okay, the adventure. When players have rolled up their characters and bought their equipment, the DM will describe the background of the adventure. This might include information about the place the characters start from, the names of any NPC companions or retainers they will have, and some rumors about the dungeon the party is going to explore. Right, so this is the definition of an old school kind of game. You start off in the village. Oh, by the way, the Caves of Chaos are down around there. All right, let's load up and move out. Party size and composition. It is not wise to adventure alone. For the monsters which may be encountered are numerous. It is much safer to go adventuring with a group of people who can help and protect each other. The best size is 6 to 8 characters. Yep. Some DMs might allow you to have more than one character. Yeah, I've seen that happen if you're playing with a few amount of players and you don't want to run with tons of hirelings, or they just don't have the money to hire them. You might allow players to have more than one character at a time. We got some notes on organizing a party. Let's see. Oh, they talk about retainers up there. Let's see. The DM may allow player characters to hire companions. Yeah. Okay. Organizing the party. Yeah, you might have the caller. Should have a mapper. Use figures if you got it. All right, so here we go. Time. This is one of those big bullet points. Something else, the concept of which has kind of been lost, but should probably be brought back. Time in D&D Adventures is given in turns of 10 minutes each. A turn is not a measure of real time, but is a measure of how much a character can do within a given amount of time. Character may explore and map an area equal to his or her movement rate in one turn. It also takes a turn for a character to search a 10 by 10 area, for a thief to check an item for traps, to rest, or to load a bag with treasure. The GM should decide how long other actions that characters might try will take. That's right. That's that exploration turn I've talked about in other videos. And it's about how much you can get done in an amount of time. And it's not really important to try to weight against the actual time. It's not about somebody looking on the internet and saying, oh, look, it only takes this long to do this, so it should only take this long in the game. It's just, at some point, you're abstracting it all and saying, look, we're just doing it in 10-minute time things. And that can be, that 10 minutes includes finding your thieves picks and outrun rolling it, and then examining the lock and doing all that doodad, putting it back. Right? You just say, okay, just 10 minutes. But you got to tick those 10 minutes off as you're doing it. And of course, those 10 minutes increments become important because that's going to get to random encounters. That's going to be on those ticks. It's going to be on, you're supposed to only be able an hour. Basically, you're supposed to rest for a turn or you start getting tired. So that's another reason to mark the ticks. Torches, lanterns, tick, 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 tick. So it's important to track it. And they're just giving you here. There it is. And remember, this is not even the GM facing side. This is the player facing side. This is something that as players you are meant to know that you have these. You should be tracking, in a sense, mentally or physically tracking your time that you're using, knowing it's kind of precious and that's important. It's a resource. We're talking about movement, about 120 feet in 10 minutes. Let's see. And that's because part of that is because you're supposed to be careful. Like, say it assumes the players are mapping carefully, searching, and trying to be quiet. So not silent like thieves, but quiet. This is the assumption. So when monsters are rolling roll, they hear you. It's not really that you're clanking loudly. You're being as quiet as you can, but only thieves can achieve silence. And then it's saying if you know basically where you are, you might be able to move faster. I just mentioned resting. After moving for 5 turns, the party must rest for 1 turn. 1 turn in 6, 1 for each hour of adventure. Must be spent resting. If the characters do not rest, they get a penalty of -1 on all to hits and damage rolls until they rest. So you start to get tired. And you could probably keep increasing that. I might even make it worse than they do, but. And then give you a little note on minis, which I will skip. You got encumbrance. It's optional, but it's I always used encumbrance. And it's kind of put in kind of coins. It's not the, it's a little bit clunky, but it does work ultimately. Nice thing about using coins is that since treasure is the main thing you're going to be carrying other than your equipment, it kind of gives you an easy thing. You find 400 coins, you can carry 800 coins. It's very easy to figure that part out. The clunkiness comes with here we see these tables where you're translating items to coin weights and how much, So I see where they were coming from because treasure is so important and they want to put everything in frame of how much, basically what's the treasure value of what you're carrying. You can carry chainmail or you can carry 400 coins worth of stuff. Practice is a little bit clunky, but it's not terrible. Certainly it's usable. We get light. Dungeons are dark. Monsters don't generally need light. Though you can have monsters require light, but a lot of times they're kind of assumed to just be able to move around without it. Infravision. Doors. So here we talk doors. One of the things when you're strong was easier to open doors. Well, the thing is with doors in dungeons are usually closed and are often stuck or locked. A lock must usually be picked by a thief. An unlocked door must be forced open to pass through it. You're going to roll a d6. 1 or 2 means the door is forced open. The roll should be adjusted by a character strength score adjustment. Stronger you are, easier to open doors, but that's the thing. Doors are not just opening wide for you. you got to force them open. And once they're open, they're generally going to swing shut on you. And that's important because when you're maybe trying to escape something, you opened up all these doors. It's not like you've greased the hinges. You unstuck the door, you opened it. When it swings shut, it's going to be stuck again. You need to then try to power through it. If something's chasing you, you don't want to be stuck against the door. So, hey, you can use a spike to wedge the door open. Or if you want to make sure that something doesn't follow you through somewhere, you can also spike it shut. This was kind of what made spikes so important, along with 10-foot poles and other things, is because the doors are, I wouldn't even call them neutral. The doors are pretty much hostile in their own way. Passively hostile. Secret doors. Secret door is any door that is hidden or concealed. A secret door usually does not look like a door. It may be a sliding panel or hidden under a rug. You got a 1 in 6 chance of finding it. Some elves and dwarves, I think, might have a little bit more. The DM should only check for finding a secret door if a player says that the character is searching for one, and searching for one in the correct area. So you just can't go in a room and say, oh, I'll check for secret doors. You're supposed to say where you are. If you think there's a secret door under the rug, you are supposed to say, I search under the rug for a secret door. And then the GM will roll. So that's kind of key, because I think a lot of people default to the shorthand of just every time they enter a room, I check for secret doors. It's not really supposed to work like that. You are supposed to be deliberate about where you're searching. And remember that every 10 by 10 area, you're ticking off 10 minutes. You don't want to just willy-nilly go into a big room and just searching everywhere, because you're going to be there for hours. And if you're in there for a long time, then chances are resources are going to run low and random encounters are going to roll up. So you got to be a little bit, careful, right? You have to manage these resources that you have. Checking out the time here. Okay, 12, not too bad. All right, retainers. A retainer or hireling is a person hired by the player character to aid the character on an adventure. The number of retainers who will follow a PC is limited by the character's charisma score. If a retainer is not well treated, he or she is likely to stop working for the PC and will tell others of the mistreatment. So that's important too. Don't beat up on your retainers. Retainers are more than just men-at-arms, soldiers hired to fight and protect their employer, but only expect to take reasonable risks. Retainers are lieutenants or assistants to a PC and are expected to lend their skills and knowledge to the benefit of the party and to take the same risks the characters expect to face. So you got to treat them well, but they're supposed to be helpful to you. But you can always use, there's morale and there's reactions, and that's where that charisma comes in. Because the better their morale is, the more likely they're not going to abandon you or turn on you. I think there was a short story Gygax wrote. I think I wrote about it a long time ago where they talked about the whole adventure was basically a hireling just going rogue on the PC they were with, based on a real event from an adventure, and it was quite fun. It was the character had wanted to go into a dungeon by himself, because that's one way you could try to get ahead in the experience department or catch up, was to go on kind of a solo adventure. Higher rewards, much higher risks. So they took their hireling, and then inside the dungeon, the hireling started to get a little bit greedy and kind of go for itself. And it turned out to be a funny kind of story. I don't remember the name, but I'm sure you can Google it and it'll turn up for you. Let's see. Next, the character must explain the duties of the job. Okay, so they're going through the hiring thing. Then you're going to roll in the reactions. Let's see. -1R. Oh, I see. Other retainers. Okay. Oh, so they're no more. Okay, so yes, you do really well. They accept and have a higher morale. If you do really terribly, not only are they going to refuse your reaction, but they're going to tell other retainers how terrible you are. But of course, if you have a positive charisma, you'll never end up with that too. So having a better charisma, not only do you get more followers, retainers, but better chance that they're going to accept. They're going to listen to your offers and be friendly. Let's see. Level of retainers. Retainer may be any level or higher and any class, but they can never be higher in level than the PC who hired them. Elvish and Dwarvish retainers should be very rare. Loyalty, so that's basically that kind of morale. Again, charisma gives you a bump there. Using retainers. Retainers are often used to strengthen a party which is attempting an extremely dangerous adventure. It is recommended that the DM not allow beginning players to hire retainers. New players tend to use retainers as a crutch, letting them take all the risks. If a dungeon is very difficult, the DM should let players have more than one character before using retainers, at least until the players are more experienced. Hirelings are experts which can be hired by the characters. They are more suited to higher level campaigns and are explained in the expert set. Experience. Retainers earn experience from adventures just like player characters do and may rise a level in their character class once they have gained enough experience. Retainers, however, only receive half the experience PCs would receive because they're only following orders. They're not doers, they're followers. I like the idea that maybe as a beginning adventure they shouldn't get retainers. I think it's an issue for DMs too. You can end up, we see this in the modern games with the kind of DMPC, and I have a video on DMPCs if you're interested in that, but the idea that the DM has an NPC that kind of becomes the focus of the campaign, starts doing everything or knows everything, and that becomes a crutch in a different way, which is that player characters can lean on them because they feel like the DM's not going to have their NPC give bad advice or do something wrong, so let the NPC do it kind of thing. And this is a similar sense of that, but this is more from the player perspective of, this is a dangerous game. You got to get used to it. This is kind of the opposite of what a lot of people do now, right? Which is where they feel like they want to put somebody there to kind of save a new player, a low-level character from doing something stupid. So you bring a hireling along to either buff up the party or give them a sort of a buffer. Whereas this is saying, hey, have them play two characters, but let them experience the dangers and everything in the dungeon. It's interesting that the thinking is kind of shifted on that. All right, so we have traps, wandering monsters. Remember, this is in the player section, so this is stuff that the game wants you as a player to know. Wandering monsters are monsters which roam through dungeons but have not been placed in rooms by the DM. Wandering monsters may be selected by the DM to fit each dungeon. For example, a guard of skeletons might patrol a tomb. Or they may choose wandering monsters at random by using the information. Yeah, so they're out there. Wandering monsters are out there. So here you get the experience points for monsters, and you can see 6 hit dice, 275 experience. And let me tell you, that is not a lot. So remember, you're a first level, let's see, what was it? A first level elf. You need something like 4,000 experience to go up to level 2. And you are, first level, you are at 1 hit die. So you kill a bunch of monsters at your level. Let's see, you are going to have to fight 400 monsters. Assuming they don't have special abilities, just to make it the math easy. 400 monsters you're going to have to plow through to go up to second level. But you might think, ooh, but if I take down one really high hit die monster, it'll be much quicker. Yeah, it will, but it's still to the factor of you're going to have to kill 20 or so, a little bit less. 6 hit die monsters. And guess what? That 6 hit die monster against your 1 hit die elf, probably not going to make it through a single round. So, and remember, this is, again, still on the player-facing side of things. This is stuff as players, you're meant to see this. You're meant to see that when you're looking at going, man, I need 1,000 some odd experience to level up. This ain't getting it done. Not going to be able to do it. Because you just look at it and you go, I got my 5th level elf, or my first level cleric has no healing. How are we going to go through and plow through hundreds of monsters to try to level up? It would take us weeks of game time. Months of game time. And given how natural healing is slow, you'll see just how unreasonable it would seem to do. All right, you can adjust XP. If something's tough or you do something special, you're going to divide XP treasures divided by the party, but the GM handles all the XP rewards. At the end of an adventure, DM totals the XP from all treasure recovered, plus all monsters defeated, then divides the total by the number of surviving characters, both player characters and NPCs. Example, a party of 7, 5 PCs and 2 NPCs goes on an adventure, but only 6 come back alive. They killed monsters for a total of 800 XP and collected 5,800 XP in treasure. For a total of 6,600 XP, each character receives 1,100 XP at the end of the adventure. The DM may give each NPC half the normal experience since the NPCs were directed and thus benefit less from the adventure. So even here in the example, you can see they lost a party member. All those monsters they fought gave them 800 XP, but what they got in treasure, 5,800 XP. Which one would you want to do more of? You wanted to get more treasure. Oops. Okay, you have maximum XP. I think you can only go up a level and halfway towards the next level. So it behooves you to, to get what you can. Don't try to get too much and then come back, because it doesn't, you lose whatever goes above and beyond that level. I think whatever level and a half or whatever it is. So you want to get back to town. And I usually do it that you have to be back in a safe spot to do all your XP stuff. So you got to get back to town, get some kind of haven. And you can't just camp in the woods and get experience. You can't just get experience halfway through a dungeon. Got to get it home. All right, encounter time. So normal time is 10 minutes a turn. Encounter time, it's around 10 seconds each. This changes from edition to edition, right? In 5th edition, it's 6 seconds. Here, it's 10 seconds. And remember here, this is not just combat. We're talking about once you get into encounter, whether you are parlaying, whether you are trying to avoid, to get away, however it is, this is just that time slows down in this encounter point. It is not just for combat. It's just any time you're just outside, or you're in this engagement with a monster, whether it's hostile or not. Time slows down because more things are going to be happening. And here we get the order of play. The DM's going to roll. So assuming we got some random monsters, we got to roll that, make that roll. Party moves, enters the room, listens, searches, does the blah blah blah. If nothing's happening, then the turn ends, right? So this is that kind of 10-minute turn. If nothing else is happening, we're going to do that. If monsters are encountered, we're going to do some more number crunching. We're going to roll 2d6, which is how far away the monsters are from the party. We're going to see if anybody's surprised. And then we're going to check initiative. And again, this is outside of combat. Initiative, because it's going to be important whether you're in combat or not, who gets to take the first move. So if the monsters go first, then they're going to get the first chance to act. It may not be combat. It might be combat, but they're going to get that initiative. Pun intended. It was not even a pun. They just get to act first, or the players get to act first. And then the next thing is obviously going to be you're going to roll for the reaction. If both sides are willing to talk, you're going to roll. If one side wants to run away, then they could check evasion pursuit, for which they have actual rules, not just how fast you run. Though that's not. We'll see it when we get there. And then if it is combat, then we use combat. Let's see, and then if we end, we can end the turn again. So then they talk about how many monsters might appear, how far away they are you surprised? If both things are surprised, and then you just stuck there looking at each other going, oh my gosh, and then everything's normal because both sides were surprised. If one side is surprised but not the other, then they get to do stuff and the other side can't. And then if neither side's surprised, then initiative. And initiative is just a 1d6. And they do it, I think it's sides, right? So you're going to roll player's initiative versus monster's initiative. If combat occurs, the side with the initiative always strikes first in that round. Both sides should roll for initiative each round. And then you can, if you want to, roll for characters and individual creatures or groups of creatures individually, but you don't have to. So here we have a set of party actions. All right, if they want to fight, then we go to combat. If they want to talk, then we go into talking. If they want to run away, then we go check out evasion. And if the party wants to see to wait and see what the monsters will do, then the DM has to figure out what the monsters will do. Some monsters always act in a certain way, right? You can't really parlay with zombies. They're just going to always attack. But often the reactions of most monsters are not always the same. The DM can always choose the monster's reaction to fit the dungeon, but if he decides not to do this, the DM may use the reaction table below to determine the monster's reactions. I think using reactions all the time is an excellent thing to do. I think too often we get in this mode of everything's just hostile. It's a lot more interesting when you roll on the reaction table. I know sometimes in certain situations it might not make sense. So, okay, the party is invading a goblin fortress. It's full of goblins. Probably you're not going to run into any goblins that are happy to see you, but you might. And that's kind of the interesting thing is you got to figure out if you roll that they are enthusiastic, you have to think about, well, why might some subset of the goblins in this fortress be enthusiastic? There might be reasons. Maybe you think, ooh, there's some kind of sub-faction that doesn't like this chieftain, and this is their chance for them to gain power, right? That's an interesting thing. It might even lead to more adventures down the line. So use it. And, you know, and if you notice here, only the worst roll is immediate attack. Everything else, there's room to maneuver. You got to roll 2, immediate attack. Everything else, you got some room there. Oh, hostile might attack. Uncertain, and maybe they're confused. They're not sure what to do. Or the monster doesn't attack and it leaves. If it's intelligent, maybe it even considers offers. You know, so make a deal. Or it can even become your enthusiastic friend. And we have movement. You can run. You can evade. And that gives you a couple things. And then we have pursuit. And this has that interesting thing that I love that I will read. Evading characters may be able to slow the pursuit by dropping things. Unintelligent monsters will stop to eat food half the time. Intelligent monsters will stop to pick up treasure half the time. Burning oil will usually, but not always, slow or stop monsters pursuing the characters. Right? So here we have you got a couple things that you know, and we're still on the player's side of it. This is not supposed to be hidden knowledge. Drop food for, animal type creatures. They may very well stop, and that will do it. Drop treasure for intelligent monsters. They may very well stop and just take it, and then you could try burning oil behind you. So there's a reason to have oil besides trying to make Molotov cocktails. It's to, create fire and smoke screens to cover retreats, and it's right there for you. You don't have to make an intelligence check to see if your characters know that. This is like the default operating information that all player characters can and should have. How to get the heck out of Dodge. Food. It's a good reason to carry extra rations around. Treasure. Hopefully you have some. Or you might have to, just spend some of your gold. Keep some on you. Just to drop some. And then, or oil. So combat. Each side, you're going to roll initiative. You're going to win. If you win initiative, if you need morale checks, so this is more for monsters, you can make those morale checks. Get your movement, you get missile fire, then spells, then hand to hand. And then you kind of rotate through all the initiative scores. And then, the DM handles any situations like surrenders, retreats, or blah, blah, blah as they happen. And you just repeat until it's finished. And again, morale, right, is super important. It's the first thing that's going to happen on a monster's turn is morale checks. And so that means that monsters may very well not fight to the death. Because that morale check is going to determine what they do for the rest of that round. So if they roll low initiative, they're probably going to use their movement to probably get away or maybe surrender or do something else. They're not going to do all these other things. So you don't have to be in the death spiral. We have to fight everything to the death. Now, some things you will, because zombies and things like that are unintelligent, they're just fixated. They're just going to fight until they're dropped or turned. But often there will be options. There will be ways to get through combats without having to fight everything to the bitter end. Defensive movement. I think you could move. Let's see. Yeah, you can do a fighting withdrawal. You can back up half your normal movement rate. There has to be room to back up. Let's see. Fighting withdrawal may be used in combat if the defender wishes to back up slowly. Movement backwards is limited to half the normal movement rate per round. There must be enough room to back up. In crowded situations, characters and monsters behind a creature attempting to use a fighting withdrawal will prevent this form of defensive movement. So the difference, so why this is important is because this next one, retreat. Any movement backwards at more than half your movement rate is a retreat. If a creature tries to retreat, opponents may add +2 to all their hit rolls, and the defender is not allowed to make a return attack. So you're giving up your attack. It's kind of that full move. You're full moving backwards. There is no opportunity attacks, but if you move and then a creature charges up behind you, they're +2. In addition to the bonus to +2 to hit rolls, attacks are further adjusted by using the defender's armor class without a shield. So, if you had a shield, you're not getting the bonus of it. Any attacks from behind are adjusted in the same manner. So here's an example. Huxley wears plate mail armor and a shield for armor class of 2. He opens the door and is surprised by a gargoyle. He doesn't have a magic weapon, so he can't hurt it. He tries to use a fighting withdrawal to let the other fighter get into the battle. Although the new fighter has a magic weapon, the gargoyle keeps attacking Huxley. He gets hit again. He decides to retreat. If the gargoyle attacks him again, his armor class is 3, and the gargoyle adds +2 to hit. Let's see, how to attack. I don't think I really need to go through that, right? We kind of have the idea of how to attack. Adjustments to attack rolls. Attacks to unhittable creatures. It's an option. Let's see. What's the options? Oh, okay. Oh, a lycanthrope could attack a white. I see. Second, attacks by monsters with more than 4 hit dice may be allowed. An owlbear could attack a were-rat. Okay. It's basically saying you can have exceptions to the magical weapons rules, depending on situationally if you want. It seems to be that that's the kind of thing that's not going to be available to most PCs. But it's kind of something, if someone were playing a lycanthrope, that just the nature of that, kind of a supernatural creature, then maybe it would allow them to attack a white. It's another supernatural creature, or that something's just super powerful, like an owlbear, is not going to be stymied by a were-rat. Okay, so you got damage, amount of damage, scoring damage, healing wounds. Healing wounds. Wounds may be cured in 2 ways, by resting or by magic. To cure wounds by resting, the wounded creature must relax in a safe place and may do nothing but rest each full day of complete rest. Let me repeat that. Full day of complete rest will restore 1 to 3 hit points. You can roll a d6 to figure that out. If a day's rest is interrupted for any reason, no healing will take place. Wounds may also be healed by certain clerical spells and some magic items. Spells will heal wounds instantly without the need for a long rest. That's interesting. There's the term long rest. Different methods of healing may be used together. A character might rest 1 full day and also be healed by a Cure Light Wound spell in the same day. So again, just goes to show you, right? You don't have healing magic at first level. It's going to take you a long time to rest up, and you can't just be, you can't do other things. This is not I'm mostly resting and then I'm partly doing that. You got to be fully rested, which pretty much means you got to be back somewhere safe, because you can't be doing, this doesn't even make allowances for doing like, well, what if we're just tending camps? Like, no, you got to be pretty much be your bed resting, right? So you got to be back somewhere in civilization, and you got to be somewhere in civilization where you just can chill out, right? You're at the inn, or you're at your own home. So just to expound back upon the I'm going to kill 1,000 monsters to go up in level, each time you get hit and you get dwindled down, it's going to take you days of game time. By the way, if you're back in town, spending days in there, you're spending money on food and lodging, and you don't start with a ton of gold, and if you spend it all on equipment, you might not have enough to afford anything, and you got to figure out some way to get it done. So there's a lot of knowledge is being dropped here in dribs and drabs about, hey, it's probably not a best idea just to go in and just attack everything. So we got some missile fire rules. Let me just see. Oops, go back here. Let's see, cover. I think in BX, I was just gonna see if I can find it. I don't think you can even attack anything that's in melee. I think that's just out of question. Right? Let me go back. Yep. A character may not fire missiles. Oh, no. Sorry, wrong thing. Let's see. At the fences between the... I don't know. I think you flat out can't fire missiles into people in melee. But I think. Let's see. To hit rolls for cover, just by the amount of cover target has, a creature may hide behind any large object. Okay. Yeah, you can get kind of partial cover. Magical bonuses. Okay, here's I have oil. Yeah, you can carry around oil and use it. We already talked about how that is good for evading things, because you can drop and light some flaming oil behind you. Holy water, good for undead. We get into saving throws. The classic saving throw types: death ray or poison, magic wands, paralysis or turn to stone, dragon breath, rod, staves, or spells. All these are going to go up with your class level, not your attributes. So, another theme is that your attributes give you some bonuses, but they're fixed, and they don't multiply as you go up levels. So you're going to get some initial bonuses for having great stats, but after that, it's all based on how you do with your class levels. And then we get into melee combat. The attack matrices. So it's actually pretty easy, and Thaco is just a way of doing this without looking at the table. So Thaco is to hit armor class 0. So for the characters, you would look at first to third level, their Thaco is 0. Their Thaco would be 19. And so there's a little bit of math involved. You'd say, okay, well, if you need to hit armor class 5, you would say, okay, that's 14, right? 5, you can just do the math. 19 minus 5 is 14. So here they don't have Thaco. Thaco, I think AD&D introduced Thaco. But it really is just a way of taking this table and turning it into something that you can just kind of do the math in your brain. But it's relatively easy to look at. Oh, a monster's attacking, it's 4 hit dice. And you just say, oh, he rolls a 16. Okay, he hits armor class 0. So then you go, hey, Fighter Jim, is your armor class less than 0? No, it's not. All right, then you're hit. And then I'll roll damage. Let's see. Morale, optional, but you should always use morale. Creature in battle may try to run away or surrender. Characters are never forced to do this. A character always reacts in the way the player wishes. NPCs and monsters, however, NPCs, so that would include your retainers, hirelings, whatever, may decide to run away or surrender. To handle the situation, each monster is given a morale score. Good morale indicates a willingness to fight on regardless of the odds. Bad morale means the monster will tend to panic and desire to withdraw from combat. So you're going to have a score. You're going to want to roll. You roll what? Under the score? If you roll under, the monsters will sit and continue to do what they're doing. If you roll over, they will perhaps retreat, and you can decide how much that is. You can also have morale degrade if you want to. Some creatures I know will start, if we make it to monsters, we'll say we'll start with really high morale, but you can have it degrade. When to check morale is checked in critical combat situations. 2 recommended times to check morale are after a side's first death, when half the monsters have been incapacitated, killed. Monsters that successfully check morale will fight to the death. So you don't need to do it all the time. I like to keep doing it. It just adds more interesting situations. You can adjust your morale. So I was talking about degrading, or you could potentially have it bump up, right? If they see a player goes down, a PC goes down, then that gives them a little bump to their morale. We're talking about retainer morale. Surrender. They can attempt to surrender. They don't have to accept it. Try. Oh, here we have an example of combat. All right, I'll read through this one. Here's an example of combat right out of the book. 4-player characters. Morgan Ironwolf, first level fighter. Silverleaf, second level elf. Frederick, first level dwarf. And Sister Rebecca, second level cleric. They enter a room through a secret door which was detected and opened by Silverleaf. The room appears to be empty. While they are searching it, a second secret door opens, which Silverleaf did not find, and the first pair of 12 hobgoblins walks in. The DM checks for surprise. The party rolls a 2, the hobgoblins a 1. Both sides are surprised. Oh my gosh, look! The 2 groups stare at each other while changing their order into better defensive positions. Since Silverleaf is the only member of the party who speaks hobgoblin, right, so it's important, she speaks speaks their language. The other characters elect him as their spokesman. The player who runs Silverleaf becomes the caller. He quickly warns the others that he may have to use his sleep spell. Silverleaf steps forward with both hands empty in a token of friendship and says, "Greetings, noble dwellers of deep caverns. Can we help you?" Just in case, Silverleaf is thinking of the words he must chant to cast his spell. The DM decides that Silverleaf's open hands and words in the Hobgoblin's language are worth +1 when checking for the reaction. Unfortunately, the DM rolls a 4 on 2d6, which even adjusted to 5 is not a good reaction. The Hobgoblins draw their weapons, but do not attack. They do move aside as 2 more Hobgoblins enter the room. So here's the interesting, right? Because we have a situation that's evolving. It's not just, oh, we did this and now it's attack. Now it's the party took a risk, tried to play it cool, raised hands. Hey, buddy, let's all be friends. The Hobgoblins are hostile, but they didn't roll 2. It's not attack outright, but the situation's degrading. But now we have a chance. It's not just, okay, now fight. Now it's, well, what's the next move? The largest of the Hobgoblins shouts in his language, "Go away! You're not allowed in this room!" "It's okay. Gary sent us," Silverleaf answers. "Huh?" The Hobgoblin wittily responds. The DM rolls a new reaction with no adjustments. The roll is a 3. The Hobgoblins charge. So we went through basically 2 rounds of negotiations there. Silverleaf jokes. I'm sure it's an inside joke. Gary guy. It's okay. Gary sent us. The Hobgoblins don't know what to make of that. And they rolled, again, another negative. They didn't roll 2, so it wasn't hostile. They rolled a 3, which is still like a degrading, the situation degrading. They are hostile. And so at that point, they'd already begun hostile. They basically, you could look at it as that second roll was them getting more hostile. And the only way they get more hostile was they already had weapons drawn, was to attack. So then we got to the attack. Now into the combat itself, the DM rolls a 2 for the Hobgoblin's initiative. Silverleaf rolls 4 for the party. So the party goes first. So even though the Hobgoblins took the initiative in a sense to charge, in combat time, the players still reacted first. So it's like the Hobgoblins started the move, and they could see that it's going, it's fisticuffs time. But Silverleaf was the faster. So Silverleaf has already warned the party that he is going to throw a sleep spell if the Hobgoblins attack. So the party moves to form a defensive line across the room, making sure that they do not get caught in the spell's area of effect. Morgan has a short bow ready to fire. Frederick is getting his throwing axe ready. Sister Rebecca is pulling out her mace and bracing her shield. Since Morgan has her bow ready and Friedrich has his axe, because remember, you're going in terms of it's group initiative, but it's what actions you're taking or when you do it. So it would be movement first, missile fire, and then spells. So the missile fire is going first. They choose their targets and fire. First level characters need a roll of 13 or better to hit the Hobgoblin's armor class of 6. Since both attacks are at short range, Morgan and Friedrich each add +1 to their rolls. In addition, Morgan has a dexterity score of 13, so she gets another +1. Therefore, Frederick needs a roll of 12 or greater to hit, and Morgan needs a roll of 11. Morgan rolls a 12, Frederick rolls a 16. Both hit. The DM rolls 1d6 for arrow damage, 1d6 for axe damage. Morgan's arrow does 4 points of damage, and the Hobgoblin she hit, who only had 4 hit points, falls. The DM announces, Hobgoblin number 2 is dead. Yay! Counting from the first end of the room. Yeah, so he's just numbering them kind of in order. Frederick's axe is found to do 5 points of damage, but the first Hobgoblin had 7 hit points. A lot of times you will roll for hit points either right now when the monsters are being hit or when they're in the room, so they're going to not have all the same. Hit 7. The 5 hit points are deducted from the Hobgoblin's total, leaving him with only 2. Silverleaf casts his spell and finds that 13 levels of monsters fall asleep. So that's how you do sleep, is you roll and find out how many hit dice, how many levels of monster you're going. Hobgoblins have 1 + 1 hit die. They're treated as 2 hit die monsters for this purpose. Therefore, 6 Hobgoblins fall asleep, the 3 who were charging, the 2 coming through the door this round, and 1 standing just beyond the doorway. At least half the monsters are out of action, so the DM decides to check the Hobgoblin's morale. Normal Hobgoblin morale is 9, and temporarily lowered to 8 in this situation. The DM rolls a 6, so the Hobgoblins will fight on. I won't go through the second round. But I think that gives you a good idea of the kind of thing that's happening. I think the really important thing here was that they got into this little negotiation prior to the combat. It wasn't just straight to fighting. I think a lot of people misrun encounters like that. Oh, they roll as random encounter, it's just roll initiative, when really it's not that the initiative part's bad, but just the understanding that just because you're rolling initiative doesn't mean that we're going to combat. It just means that we're going into this time where timing is really important. It's that you have options to do things. Let's see. So that's an example. We're getting into monsters. Let's see. Do I need to go? Let's see. It's just monster powers. White apes. Bandits. Bears. I'm just going to see. Berserkers. Boars. Bugbears. Carrion crawlers. Cave locusts. That's cool. Giant centipedes. Always a classic. Doppelgangers. Dragons, of course. More on dragons. They're different breath weapons. We got the dwarves and elves for your NPC dwarves, NPC elves. Ooh, giant ferrets. Gargoyles. The classic gelatinous cube. Blah, blah, blah. Living statues. Giant lizards. What do we got here? A Medusa. Just in case. Just in case you needed one. Normal humans. Always love a good old normal human. And yeah, I don't want to spend a ton of time on monsters because you can, they're just stats. Save or die poisons, always fun. Undead. Treasure. So here it's kind of a little bit of they do this kind of thing where you have. It's not the easiest system, I guess, is maybe I would say. It's a little bit fiddly. So you're gonna get a list of types of treasures, and then you roll. You look for your type of treasure, and then you roll on the treasure types to see what you get. So if it's treasure type A, you roll a 25% chance that there's 1 to 6,000 copper, 30% chance that you have 1 to 6,000 silver. I mean, now it's kind of I think Dungeon and other sites have this kind of all automated, so you can just say, hey, just put in what type of treasures, and it spits all this out. But, you got to do a little bit of work in here. And I think for certain monsters, if I go back up into monsters, yeah, so let's see, treasure type. So, treasure type 5, yellow mold, just has no treasure. Let's see, what did the Medusa have? Let me go back up to the Medusa. Medusa had treasure type F. So if they were to get to the Medusa's lair and not just finding it. So this is not really the treasure type they have necessarily on them. It's kind of if you find their lair. So you find out where the Medusa's been hiding, which may be where you encounter them. Maybe somewhere else. But if you get them and you find their treasure, so you had treasure type F, you would go, taking that treasure type F, you would come down here, find F, and you say, okay, no copper. There's a 10% chance there's a whole bunch of silver. There's a 20% chance there's a bunch of electrum. 45% chance there's some gold, platinum down the line, jewelry, and then 30% chance that there's any 3. And then plus a weapon, and plus a potion, plus a scroll. So you would then do all that math and you come out to the treasure. And you can see here. Now, what I like about these is there's a lot of variance, right? Your magic items, you're rolling on tables for all this stuff, so you can really get a great wide variety. But if you're looking at this, so you need X amount of, so you need, let's say a party full of fighters. Let's just say, keep it simple, needs 5, if needs 5 fighters would need 5,000 gold to go up, because that would split up to 1,000 each. If you're looking here, that Medusa, if you get her gold, there's a really good chance between all of this, you're going to get enough experience to go up a level just by getting her stash. And you don't have to necessarily kill the Medusa to get her stash. You could sneak into the Medusa's lair, go in through the back door, get the stash, sneak out again, bam, boom. And of course, if you find hidden treasure caches and things like that, that's where you're going to get a lot of treasure. And there's enough variance that you could really clean up just getting one significant treasure hoard. You don't generally get experience for magic stuff that you can use like weapons and armor, because the idea is that they are useful to you enough as what they are that you don't get to double dip and get experience for that. But the other stuff, certainly. So we got all kinds of wands, armor, gems, coins, jewelry. And I've used the white box version of the random gems. I think it was even a lot higher than that. So you get gems and coins, and I'm not going to go through the treasure. All right, so I think we all kind of. So here now we're finally into Dungeon Master information. So this stuff's really interesting because this is kind of laying out how structuring. They're calling it a scenario. I'll read the top here. Before players can take their characters on adventures into dungeons, the DM must either create a dungeon or draw its map or become familiar with one of the dungeon modules. The B, quote-unquote B, series of modules is designed for use with the basic set. The module included in the set may be used to start adventuring immediately and will provide some ideas for designing dungeons. Like Keep on the Borderlands, which I will probably do in the near future as I read along. This section gives a step-by-step guide to creating a dungeon. The guide is followed by an example of part of a dungeon level. The example follows the same steps as the guide and illustrates each step. A set of suggested symbols is included for DMs to use when drawing a dungeon map. The same level is only part of a larger dungeon. The sample tower may be used to practice adventuring, and the dungeon outline may be useful if the DM wants to finish the dungeon. So here we go. So we're going to choose a scenario. Scenario is a background theme or idea which ties the dungeon together. A scenario will help keep a dungeon from becoming a boring repetition of open the door, kill the monster, take the treasure. Right? And so here they're basically hitting you straight on, which was the big complaint about a lot of dungeon crawling. Oh, we're just opening doors, kill the monsters, taking the treasure. But here they're saying, right here in the book, hey, it should be more than that. It should be, we want to give some grounding to this place. A good scenario always gives the players a reason for adventuring. The DM should also design a dungeon for the levels of the characters who will be playing in it. A good scenario will also give the DM a reason for choosing specific monsters and treasures to put in the dungeon, right? So you're going to pick a scenario, and the scenario is going to ground your dungeon in multiple ways. It's going to give the players a reason for going. It's going to give you an idea of the context of what monsters should be there. So if you are, the scenario is we need to repulse this tribe of kobolds, well, then you already know that your monsters are going to revolve around stuff with kobolds, like that. A scenario may be anything the GM can imagine to help some new DMs. Some common scenarios are listed below and explained. The DM can fill in the details. So here we have some scenarios. 10, perfect for rolling on a die if you need some inspiration. Exploring the unknown. So the players are the characters are explorers. Investigating a chaotic outpost, recovering ruins, destroying an ancient evil, visiting a lost shrine, fulfilling a quest, escaping from enemies, rescuing prisoners, using a magic portal, finding a lost race. All interesting, and they're not meant to be necessarily the last word on it, but yeah, take that as inspiration. But this is something that, as the kind of scenario, it's that thing. It's like your elevator pitch that I mentioned before in some other videos. This is the thing you're going to pitch to the players to come play this adventure. Hey, you guys are prisoners and you're escaping from here, or you're rescuing prisoners from their imprisonment, or you need to get into this place because you need to use a magic portal to escape from this plane or dimension, or to get somewhere else. Maybe you need to find these lost people. Or there's the caves of chaos are right here, and they need to figure out what's going on. There's some ruins we need to be recovered, which means they need to be cleaned out of things. So we'll go through the details they gave. Exploring the unknown. The party is hired to map unknown territory. The area might once have been familiar, but is now overrun or destroyed. A strange tower might mysteriously appear overnight in a familiar area. And they talk about, they give you some examples in some of the published modules. This is In Search of the Unknown or Palace of the Silver Princess, or examples. Investigating a chaotic outpost. This is basically Keep on the Borderlands. The scenario has to do with a chaotic invasion, either in progress or about to begin. The characters must enter the enemy outpost, find out the strength and plans of the invaders, and destroy the outpost if possible. Recovering ruins. The party is usually scouting an old village before permanent settlers move in. The ruins have often been overrun by a specific kind of monster, which must be killed or driven away. The ruins could be part of or underneath a thriving town. The old go into the sewers, right? That's what you got there. Destroying an ancient evil. The evil is usually a monster or NPC, the exact type not known by the players. Sometimes the evil has been deeply buried and reawakened by recent digging, aka the Balrog in Lord of the Rings. This theme is often used along with others. For example, an ancient evil may have to be destroyed before some ruins are resettled. Well, there you go. You can chain them up or mix and match. Visiting a lost shrine. To remove a curse or recover a sacred item, the players must travel to a shrine which has been lost for ages. The characters usually have only a rough idea of its location. The players may have to consult an oracle or seer during the visit. Fulfilling a quest. That's pretty straightforward. Escaping from enemies. Also pretty straightforward. Rescuing prisoners. Straightforward. I'll say the Haunted Keep scenario is the basis for the simple. So the sample dungeon we're about to see after this is a rescuing prisoner scenario. Using a magic portal. Finding a lost race. Might be used with destroying an ancient evil. Could be the same. So now you're going to decide on a setting. You don't need to draw a detailed map of the dungeon first, but it's useful to have a general idea of what it will look like. When deciding on the shape of the dungeon, the DM should also outline ideas for rooms or areas for the dungeon. A few common settings include a castle or tower, caves or a cavern, abandoned mine, a crypt or a tomb, an ancient temple, stronghold, or town. So you've got the scenario. That's kind of what the players are doing, other than getting loot and treasure, but kind of their purpose for going to this place. Now, what kind of place is it? Is it a castle or tower? Is it a caves? Is it a mine? Similar to caves, but whatever. Is it a crypt or a tomb? Is it a temple? Or is it some kind of stronghold or town? I don't know how that... Some of those seem to be... I guess tower or town are different, but castle and stronghold I read is the same, but whatever. Just know what kind of thing it is, because that's going to help you determine what this thing looks like. Then you're going to decide on any special monsters. So you've decided that you're rescuing prisoners from kobolds who've taken over a town. Okay, so kobolds, and then you think about, well, what kind of monsters can we associate with kobolds? There's always the kind of vermin type monsters like giant centipedes and the like that just follow and feed upon the detritus left behind by others, or things like carrion crawlers if there's a lot of dead, right? So you put together a list of these things, and these are not your wandering monsters. These are the kind of ones these are your marquee monsters. So maybe you'd say, okay, not giant centipedes, those are wandering monsters, but the carrion crawlers is like a set encounter, a set piece. So those are special. Now you're going to draw a map. And they'll show the Haunted Keep. You draw it to scale, 5 feet or 10 feet to a square. The general shape is going to be determined by the setting, right? Makes sense. If it's a tower, it's going to look like a tower. If it's a castle, it should kind of follow a castle type design. If it's something else, it should follow that. Caves or mines should follow that. Then you're going to stock the dungeon, and you can do it randomly. First, you're going to roll for the contents, and then you're going to roll for treasure. So you're going to roll here. What is in it? Roll here. Does it have treasure in there? Yeah. So, but it's kind of dependent. So the idea is you're rolling for a monster. If there is treasure, sorry. So hold on. Let me figure this out again. Let's see. So you roll 1d6 for contents, and then roll on the second table for treasure according to the result of the first roll. A yes result means that treasure is there along with... Okay, yeah, so that's right. So you're going to roll here, and then you're going to roll there. Monster. Oh, now that's what was confusing me. So you're going to roll in here first. So you get a room with a monster. Then you're going to roll a die here, and depending on what... You're going to lose the column of what you did before. So if you're rolling on monster table, there's going to be treasure unless you're 4 to 6, right? If you rolled a trap, then you only have a 1 or 2 chance of treasure. If you rolled empty, then there's only a 1. So That's what, for some reason it was confusing me. This happens sometimes, and this is something that I think sometimes the modern retro clones do a little bit better, is organize these to make it more obvious. But it's, once you get I was looking at it a little bit funny, but yeah. So there you go. So if you need to just determine it by chance, you can roll through how many monsters, whatever. I think there are some guidelines for how many rooms of each type there should be. I might have skipped over that. Because not every room should be. I think they even talk about the fact. I think it might be in the white box where they say how many rooms in the average dungeon should be filled and how many should be empty. But you can just use this if you want to. Let's see. A monster result means that the DM should roll on a monitoring monster table to determine the type present. A trap may be located in an empty room or on the treasure. A special is anything not exactly a trap, but placed for special reasons. The DM should make up traps and specials, but some suggestions are here below. We have room traps, poison gas, fog, a pit, ceiling block fall, pendulum blade, a chute, treasure traps, poison needles, spring fire darts, like a flashbang type thing, a poison snake, some kind of spray. And then special things might be a moaning room, where it makes it, come in and it's got sound, or a corridor that has a moan. The room turns or sinks while the door locks. That's kind of creepy. Illusory doors or stairs or corridors, shifting blocks that close things off, trap doors to tunnels, alarms that summon some kind of special monster, talking statues, magic pools. All magic pools are always fun. Magic gates, also always fun. Flying weapons, also fun. And then you got your treasure, and it gives you some scope for different levels. And it only goes up to 2 or 3 because that's your expectation, is that you're in levels 1 to 3 for this set before you go to the expert book. And let's see, filling in the final details. Once the room is stocked, the DM, you could fill in details about the corridors, anything going on there, because we're really concerned in this part with doing rooms, and then you go and you fill out what's happening in the corridors, if anything. Then you could create NPC parties if you need to, if you want to, because I think that often comes up in the random encounters is another adventuring party you're running in there, which is always fun when you run into them. And in these kind of rules, it's not complex. Like now in 5th edition, it's kind of a pain if you're going to make a party of 5 PCs. You'd have to have Roll20 or something to automate it, or you'd have to figure them out in advance. But it's fairly easy. Don't have to do a lot of work. And you just get some. And here we get some wandering monster tables. So the kind of stuff you can get at level 1: wolves, sturges, sprites, spider crabs, and it gives you their alignments. Does the spider crab have poison? Yep, it does have poison. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot. And look at those numbers. Hey, 3 to 8. You can run into 3 to 18 halflings. 3d6 halflings run into the room. 44 kobolds. Gosh, those crab spiders, you can end up with 4 of them. So things can get nasty fast. And this is level 1. These are the ones just wandering around. Forget the ones you've put into other rooms. These are just things that are just wandering around. Let's see. Did I miss anything? No, I don't think so. And then we got level 2. More nasties, and then level 3. All right, so let's get into the example here. Let's see. Example of a dungeon design, the Haunted Keep, which is a first level dungeon. Or it's the first level of the dungeon. So they're going in order of kind of the rules. So they've given you the process of building it out. So they're basically going through the same thing here with there. So first they've chosen a scenario. In the distant past, the Haunted Keep was the castle of the Rodimus family. It was abandoned many years ago when the family mysteriously disappeared. It is now rumored to be haunted. Strange lights and sounds are often seen and heard in the ruins by passing townspeople. Recently, a tribe of goblins has been raiding the countryside. On their last raid, they captured a dozen prisoners. The prisoners are all relatives of the player characters who have banded together to rescue their relatives. The party has tracked the goblins to the keep or castle right up to the only door to the east tower. So, bam. Right there, you have the whole setup. And I would suggest, and I think this is kind of leading that direction, is that's where you start the adventure. You don't start in town. You don't start when the news comes of the prisoners. You start right there. All that stuff's happened, and you start right there looking at the door on the east tower. Most of the haunted keep is in ruins. Only 2 towers remain, connected by a gatehouse, and only the first floors of these towers are still intact. The keep was built with rough granite blocks, now pitted with age. The door into the east tower is wooden, and one hinge is rusted through. All right, so again, this is an example of all the setup, and this is stuff, right? You would come in and say, okay, here's our adventure for the day. If you guys all agree, you guys are, you're these people, your relatives all been taken, you've chased down the goblins back to this abandoned, ruined keep into the east door. So that right here, right? So you decide on the setting, which is the keep, and the haunted keep is 2 towers connected by a gatehouse. It's only got 1 floor. Since the rest has been, jumped. So the special monsters it's not kobolds, it's goblins. So special monsters are goblins. And then you look at other common first level monsters that you might want. So you have, they talk about giant rats, bandits, and hobgoblins. So things that are, maybe they're bandits that are allied with the goblins. You have hobgoblins, maybe are the leaders, giant rats. And it says in parentheses, possibly hunted by giant ferrets. So that's even another one. And then I guess we're talking about maybe having catacombs on the second level. Then you maybe have some undead there if there's catacombs with their bodies. All right, so you draw the map out, saying that, hey, maybe the towers are square rather than round, just to make it easier to draw. Stock the dungeon. We've got a couple of rooms. So you rolled 1d6, and okay, they got 5. So the room is empty of monsters and traps. And they roll again, check for treasure. No treasure. So the room is just empty. But you'd want to figure out at that point what kind of room it was and describe it. But there's nothing really of value in there. Room 2. DM rolls a 2, so you throw some monsters in there. They're going to use the table, and they rolled 1d20, got a 16. Got some crab spiders that have a treasure type. Monsters state that 1 to 4 crab spiders normally appear. So the DM rolls 1d4. The result of 1. This is 1 crab spider. Rolls 1d6 for treasure. Rolled of 2. Indicates that treasure is present. Rolling percentage for the treasure types table. The results. So went through this list. Basically got none. Yeah. So ended up with nothing. Even though you could potentially... Oh, there is silver. So there's some silver. Separate rolls are made for gems and jewelry. The only treasure present is silver pieces. Yep, 99. So there's 99 silver pieces in that room guarded by the crab spider. The GM decides that the treasure is too small for a special trap. Finish stocking that room. Then you go through the third room. I'm just going to, etc., etc. And then we got some final details. So he's gone through, he's done all the rooms. When expanding, so the key, okay, so they do that. I said expanding the keep, the DM should create a feeling of a haunted house by adding spooky noises and some ghostly figures which appear suddenly in odd places, though they're harmless. All right, so we got this key. So the dungeon key. So this is just a listing of all the rooms with kind of the details of what's in it. I'm not going to go through all of those. Here we have the map. So we get so this is basically it in the overview, and then here inside is the east tower. So the east tower basically blows up into this other one, and the west tower was just an empty room. Looks like there's some kind of... So you can see how these towers split into multiple rooms. This is kind of the old school style, right? It's perfectly usable. It's not fancy. It doesn't have all kinds of doodads, but just tells you, kind of gives you a rough idea of what's in the rooms. And then here we have kind of a sample. This could be kind of the catacombs. So you hear the gatehouse on top, 2 towers. This is that kind of vertical slice. And now you're seeing that there's stairwells that go down in different rooms and ladders and some caverns, and looks like some underwater. Underground lake kind of situation. Let's see, is it worth me reading out the sample dungeon expedition? I'll do a little bit. So here's a sample. I'll read some of the situation. So the situation is the party includes 4 second-level characters and a first-level dwarf. Morgan Ironwolf, a female fighter, is the caller. You got Silverleaf again, Friedrich, Sister Rebecca. Ooh, Black Dougal, a thief. They've equipped themselves. They've journeyed into the Haunted Keep, and they've discovered the trapdoor in the 4th room that leads to the 2nd level. Morgan is the caller, and she's going to relay the party's actions to the DM after the characters decide what they want to do. And these in samples situations are interesting because they often will elucidate on rules that you might not actually have gotten in the text or some guidance that the text didn't give you. I think there's some that are kind of famous. I don't know if this is one of them. Certainly, I think in the home set, because they actually talk about stuff that's not clearly covered. So you actually get a hint about how you were meant to handle certain situations because it comes up in their example. So the DM says, having killed the hobgoblins, you open the trapdoor and find a set of stairs going down to the south. Morgan, the caller, says, we're going down the stairs. DM says, after 30 feet, you reach a round landing with 2 sets of stairs. One goes down to the east and the other goes down to the west. Morgan says, Friedrich looks down the east staircase and Silverleaf looks down the west one. What do they see? DM, the party's torches mess up the infravision so they can only see 20 to 30 feet. The west stairs go down 10 feet and turn sharply south. The east stairs go down at least 30 feet. Also, Fred smells a rank, musty odor coming up from below. Frederick, hey everybody, there's something down there. I don't like it. Morgan says, anyone want to go down the east stairs? Okay, we're going down the west stairs. There was a little pause there, a little ellipsis to pause to show that she was looking for confirmation and got none, or got confirmation not to go down the east stairs. DM says you go down 10 feet down the west stairs. It turns south to 20 feet, 30 feet down the stairs end, and you step onto a 20-foot wide corridor that goes east and west. You see a door 10 feet up the west corridor on the north wall. You notice there's very kind of strict sense of distances here, and that's really because, the expectation is someone's mapping them, so you're giving them the distances. Sometimes, I will sometimes be less, I will say like approximately or whatever, but the idea is that they're mapping it. So as they're eyeballing and moving, and part of that is built into the time it takes to move from A to B, is that they are taking measurements in, whichever way works for them. That was Rebecca, who's mapping, says that was the north wall. DM says, yes, the door is in the north wall. Morgan says, we're going to the door. Silverleaf, Black Dougal, and I will listen. As you step into the corridor, a breeze from the west makes your torches flicker. Rebecca says, is it strong enough to put them out? DM says, no, chuckling, not yet. Oh. Morgan, then we'll listen at the door. The DM rolls some dice. You don't hear anything. Morgan, after discussion with the others, will leave the door and go down the passage to the west. DM says, after 30 feet, there is a side passage to the south, 10 feet wide. The main corridor continues west. You notice the breeze is stronger, and your torches are beginning to flicker even more. Frederick, I don't like this. Dougal says, you've got infravision. Morgan says, we'll take the east passage. We'll take the side passage. DM, okay, after 50 feet, you find doors to the east and west. The passage continues south. Morgan, Silverleaf, Fred, and Black Dougal will listen at the west door. Black Dougal hears muttering voices. Do I understand them? Says Black Dougal. I speak Common, Orc, Goblin, and Elvish. Remember, again, showing the importance of knowing extra languages. After deciding on a chance for Dougal to recognize Goblin language through the heavy door and then rolling, no, the voices aren't loud enough. Victims. Freudian slip. Morgan, we're getting ready for combat. Fred and I will force the door. Dougal, I'll guard the rear. Good thief. Get into the rear. Okay, the party is set with Black Dougal guarding the rear. Rolls to see if the door is forced. It opens. You see half a dozen goblins. Let me at them, says Frederick. You can't be surprised, but they can be. Rolls. Let's see. Oh, rolling for surprise. No, roll for initiative, please. All right, so then you get into combat. So there you can see kind of an idea of how the caller would work. The mapper is obviously mapping. They're discussing things. They're doing listening. Yeah, I won't go through the rest of that, but you get the idea. So here's a section I think is actually kind of important. Dungeon mastering is a fine art. There's some really great advice in here. I think the advice is good regardless of which edition of the game you're ultimately playing. There's some stuff in here that's kind of evergreen as far as advice goes. I think so. I'll just read some of this. The success of an adventure depends on the DM and his and her creation, the dungeon. The DM should have the dungeon carefully mapped out before play begins. Even so, a DM will quickly find that it's impossible to predict every possibility. After all, there are several players and only one DM. It is not unusual for players to find a solution or pose a new problem that the DM has not even thought of. It's very important for the DM to be flexible, right? Can't stress that often enough. I've said it a bunch of times. Be flexible, right? And there it is. First, basically, piece of DM advice: be flexible. It is important that the DM be fair, judging everything without favoring one side or the other. The DM is there to see that the adventure is interesting and that everyone enjoys the game. D&D is not a contest between the DM and the players, and they bolded that, so we make sure we know that. It's not a contest. The DM should do his or her best to act impartially when taking the part of monsters or handling disputes between characters, right? I think, again, I've said that multiple times. They said it better, and they said it first. Way back here, 1980, 1981. It's not a contest. Try to be fair. Try to be impartial. That referee, be the ref. That's not in the rules. The players will often surprise the DM by doing the unexpected. Don't panic. When this happens, the DM should just make sure that everything is done in the order given by the outline or sequence of events being used. Minor details may be made up as needed to keep the game moving. All DMs learn how to handle both new ideas and unusual actions quickly and with imagination. Right? So it's kind of along the lines of being flexible. You're going to have to find stuff that's not in the rules. Don't panic. You just muddle your way through, figure it out, keep it moving. Quite often, a DM can decide on a solution to a player's actions not covered by these rules. Other times, a problem may have no simple solution. One quick way for a DM to decide whether a solution will work is by imagining the situation and then choosing percentage chances for different possibilities. For example, suppose the GM is running a combat that is taking place on a ledge next to an unexplored chasm. One player suddenly decides that his character has no chance to survive combat. The player announces, "My character wants to jump into the chasm to escape." There may be a chance that he will fall to a nearby ledge or land in a pool of water at the bottom of the chasm. The DM thinks about the dungeon for a minute and remembers that an underground river flows through some of the lower dungeon levels, so there might be a pool below. Even so, the character will fall 60 feet, and a normal fall will do 1d6 points of damage per 10 feet fall, and this character has only 7 HP and seems likely to die even if the water cushions his landing and reduces the damage. However, there should always be a chance to do something nearly impossible. A player should have, at the very least, a saving throw or a stated percentage chance of a miraculous occurrence saving the character. The DM answers, "Looking down into the chasm, your character can estimate that he has a 98% chance of dying, no saving throw, if he jumps. If you decide your character jumps, roll percentage dice. A result of 99 or 100 will mean that your character lives, but any other result will mean that he will die in the attempt. Do you still want to jump?" So there's couple key things here that I always want to point out. One is that percentage dice only come up in thief abilities in this game, nothing else. But they're basically saying that you could use percentage dice to adjudicate things that don't have easy solutions. Not everything you want to run maybe uses a D6 because it's just not granular enough. All right? Or maybe you don't want to default to a D20. 5% is more than you want to give them. In this case, you want to give them a 2% chance. So you give them that chance. And the other part of it is, hey, give them a chance. Maybe you think like that's impossible, right? They're trying to jump from the top of the Empire State Building into a thimble full of water. But you know what? You just say, all right, well, you got a 1 in 100 chance. You roll double odds. You roll 100. You make it. Otherwise, you're dead. Just give them a chance. It gives players an opportunity to try something crazy. And I've seen it happen where players have needed a double ought to get something. They got to roll 100 and they hit it. And there's no funnier, more memorable moment when they just hit the crazy impossible shot. So let it happen. There's always a chance. A DM may want to base a character's chance of doing something on his or her ability scores, strength, dexterity, and so on, to perform a difficult task, such as climbing up a rope or thinking of a forgotten clue.
The player should roll the ability score or less on a d20. The DM may give a bonus or penalty to the roll depending on the difficulty of the action. -4 for a simple task, +4 for difficult task. In this case, you're rolling under, so negative modifiers is helpful. A roll of 1 should always succeed. A roll of 20 should always fail. I lean on this a lot. I think using ability scores, it's a great stand-in for using skills if you're running an old school game. And if players tend to lean into their attributes that are higher than 10, then it gives them a little bit of a chance to be heroic because they're going to have better odds. If the fighter character with 15 strength is leaning on stuff that uses strength, then they're going to have a better than average chance of surviving or getting it done. And that's fine, right? It's a really great, easy system, and it's a way to leverage attribute scores. If you feel like, well, hey, they're not used enough in the penalties that they give and this or that and the other, then here's a way to leverage them essentially as a quick and dirty skill type system. The DM is the boss. The DM decides how these rules will be used in the game. A good DM talks about problem areas with the players and considers reasonable requests by them. The player should realize, however, that the final decision is the DM's, not theirs, and not this booklet's. If a disagreement holds up play, the DM may make a temporary decision and talk it over with the players when the adventure is over. If a player disagrees strongly enough, he or she may quit the game. It is up to DM to create an adventure the players can enjoy. Right? So here's the kind of stuff you read up all the time, but here it is very succinctly. Someone's got to be, I think oftentimes, and maybe this makes a mistake of putting in kind of a power dynamic. Ultimately, look, the reason why the United States, a lot of other countries have a kind of Republican type system is eventually sometimes you just need one person to make the say. And that's the GM gets to be that person. But at the same time, like this says, you should be doing every opportunity to A, make sure everything is transparent. You're talking everything over with your players. 2, you're taking into account what they're saying. And, 3, the players have the ability to kind of walk away if it's really bad. And ideally, if everybody's walking away from the game, the GM should go, oh my gosh, I'm losing all my players. I need to figure it out. There's that kind of check and balance almost. But if it's a split decision, somebody's got to cast that deciding vote. It's the DM. Everyone is here to have fun. The DM should make the adventure seem as real, quote unquote, to the players as possible. All should avoid getting stuck in long discussions about rules or procedures. The game should move along with humor as well as excitement. Yeah, so don't get caught up in stuff that's not pushing the game forward. Everything is balanced. The DM should try to maintain the balance of play, quote unquote. The treasures should be balanced by the dangers. Some groups prefer adventures where advancement between levels is swift. In such a case, since the treasures are generally greater, the monsters should be tougher. Other groups prefer adventures where character development is more important and advancement is slower. If the monsters are too tough and if the parties are reduced by many deaths, then few characters will ever reach higher levels. The DM should keep in mind that further supplements will detail character levels up to 36. It should be very difficult for a character to attain this level, but it should not be impossible. So even here back then, this is the heart of what would be considered OSR, and they're essentially saying, look, temper the game to fit your party. If you have players that want tough challenges and loot and want to go fast, then you build out your dungeons to suit. Bigger treasures, harder monsters. If your character wants a lot of character, your party wants a lot of character growth, then maybe you level up slowly, which means you could fight more or, lower level treasures, lower level risks for longer. Right there. It's, it doesn't have to be super deadly if your table doesn't like super deadly. You have to try to balance it. But of course the game says that hey, look, it's tough. Getting up to 36, you're trying to get there, it's just flat out tough. But you can tailor the experience to match your table. Your character doesn't know that. A player should not allow his or her character to act on information that character has no way of knowing. For example, attacking an NPC because the NPC killed a previous character run by the player, even though the NPC and current character have never met. If the players get careless about this, the DM should remind them. The DM may, in addition, forbid certain actions to the characters involved. The DM should make it clear to the players before the adventure begins that characters may not act information they don't have. It will save lots of time later, right? So, they're not, here, they're not really talking about metagaming as in like they knowing the secret powers of a monster, but it's more like, look, you don't it's kind of don't just go out there and like Fred gets taken down by Jim, so now Fred Jr. comes in. As soon as they see Jim, they just go running at them, right? This is kind of like, hey, don't do that. But basically, it's kind of meta knowledge, and of course, it's say discuss how you're going to handle such things. And then we got some suggestions. Mapping is a suggestion. Monster descriptions, hit points, just other things, all good. But that's basically it, right? And we got some appendix material. If you want to read more, got the glossary. Hey, Gen Con. I'm pretty sure that P.O. box is probably not the same anymore. We're going to Gen Con. There it is. An index. And there's the back of the book. So we are done. I will not give too much of a wrap up because, hey, I already know this thing and I already have my mind made up. I've loved it since I set my eyes on it way back when in the early 80s. And I love it still. I think it's a really great laid out book. I think it gives you everything you need to know. I feel like in a good teaching manner, though I haven't tried to teach it to anybody reasonably soon. Maybe my daughter at some point, she's 5, she's going to be 6 next month. So maybe that'll be something that I might teach her. If I don't pick something like Beyond the Wall or one of those type systems, maybe I'll try to teach with her. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments once this, or, since I'm wrapping up, I don't know if there's anybody in the chat has any questions or anything they want to ask. Now's the time to ask it. This will get up in the main YouTube library or on the channel. I think it takes them a little while. I've been on it's going to be about 2 hours, a little more than 2 hours. So I don't know how long it'll take, but not too long. It'll get up on the regular rotation, and feel free to comment. I will try to get to the expert set soon because it's on my list. I think most people, it's been a while since I've read it. I know most people feel that the basic set is the better rule set than the expert. But I haven't looked at them so closely to one another in forever. So that would be interesting to check out. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Obviously, hit me up on social media. You can see you got the Facebook and Twitter there at the top. Hope you enjoyed this read through. Again, hit me up with any questions or comments. That's all I got for now. Oh, and give me hey, look, if you like the stuff, I've seen some people I appreciate. I've already given some likes to the stream. If you like it, please give me the thumbs up. If you want to subscribe, which is great, hit the subscription button, and then there's the little bell if you want to be notified. But however, I have Patreon and whatnot that the links are in the description, in the show descriptions, if you want to help out that way. But however you help out, I really do appreciate it, and it helps me keep things going. But have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching, listening, and I will talk to you later.